All right.
Welcome back, everybody, to another imperfect episode.
Yes.
Imperfect podcast episode.
Yes.
What an apt way to start. We messed up the start of the recording, which ties perfectly with our.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Literally, like, we just started talking for like 20 seconds and it wasn't even recording. So that just highlights our day or highlights our week. But yes, welcome officially to our podcast. If you've made it all the way this way, congratulations. If this is the first podcast or episode you listen to, go back and listen to the others. But still, thank you for finding us.
Yeah.
My name is Akoo, and I got my buddy here, Stephen.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what are we talking about today?
Oh, today we are talking about who is your source? That's the question. Who is your source, or what is your source?
Okay.
I guess is another way of, maybe that's what you think of. What is it you run to for comfort, guidance, whenever you're having a bad day?
Yes.
Or things like that.
Yeah, or simply, where do you go to find information?
Yeah.
Or who do you go to find information? Who do you go
true.
to find provision? Who do you go to find confidence, passion? You know, like,
yeah.
what like, there's as human beings, as people, like, there's a lot of things that fuel us or challenge us or push us to go through different ways or different directions and stuff like that. So yeah, we're gonna try to tackle all of that as far as who/what is your source. So I'm excited.
Yeah, we'll definitely go into that.
Mm-hmm.
I think why we chose this is just because at least for me, like,
Mm-hmm.
I found it pretty important to identify what I'm running to throughout the week, because that's what allows me to keep going through my week, or allows me to, like, day by day still have, like, a good attitude about things when things aren't going well. And I thought it was interesting that we chose this topic, and man, it was really funny how God works. We had chose this topic about like a week ago, and then today is Thursday, and this past Tuesday we were part of like a leadership class, and they mentioned, like, and questioned the class, like, who is your source? And it was just such a cool moment. We like locked eyes with one another, like,
like,
this is crazy.
Like, we locked eyes with each other like a couple of times during that night.
It was a notebook moment. But I think it's really important, because I think even as we felt, even just the past couple weeks, I think for myself, and I think Akoo can attest, like, where we have fallen short or just had weeks that were draining, where things aren't going as well, conversations didn't go as planned, or relationships might break down to some extent. And it's frustrating. Like, those things happen, and it's not like like, no one can really stop these things from happening. The world moves. And so for us, I think it's a really important topic to talk about, because you want to try to find a source that's unchanging, that you can rely on no matter the situation or stage of life that you're at. Yeah,
or even a source that is true. You know, a source that you can rely on, a source that you can find power and freedom and life and refreshment on, not something that is temporary because of the quote unquote season you're going through, or, you know, something that you're trying to struggle through or stuff like that. So
so let's as we go into that, let's talk about this, because there's a lot we do have to go through. Like Akoo talked about, we do want to answer the question, what is the source, and we'll just again scratch the surface of this topic, because I think it's important, but kind of the lay of the land is we're going to define what we mean by source in greater detail, and kind of give examples, and we'll talk about, at least for us who are Christian, what we view as the dangers of worldly sources, not in of themselves, but what they present, the dangers they present to us.
Exactly.
We'll dive into dangers of quote unquote church sources and what that means, and like why there's a different danger to it. But also, like, still, like, it's the same interweaving of whatever.
Yeah.
And then we'll touch upon what we believe is the true source that you should be seeking, and
ultimate source.
like why it's the ultimate source, and like how we pursue it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important, because I mean, we can sit here and tell you why, like, but it's hard to know how.
Exactly. And the biggest thing is we want to give you guys all the resources, all the tools, all the things that we found out from our research and our perspectives. But ultimately, you guys are the ones that are making the decision. You guys are the ones that are going to these sources or researching through whatever you're doing and believing or using these sources to edify your lives. So we want to hopefully in this episode give you guys all the tools and resources available from our perspective to hopefully give you guys and keep you guys on the right track to become successful, or to just have something that is true and something that is strong.
Yeah.
But as we get started, I think it's just one place to start. What is source? Like, how do we define source? I guess that's where we could start and kind of open up with that. And I took a moment. I was actually, when I was doing work, I was kind of doing some research, and before I get into it, I've had like a kind of crappy day, honestly. It wasn't like bad as in I was bombarded by a lot of things, but it was just uneventful. Like at work, I found myself really stagnant in a lot of things, in a lot of meetings. I was just like, I work from home today, so I didn't really find myself very energetic leaving my desk or even leaving the couch. I found myself going to the couch and just sitting there. I may or may not have taken a nap once or twice. And I just woke up very slumped and kind of weary. That's funny that I mentioned that word, because I'm going to come back to it. But all that to say, this just today and kind of this week, I've just been feeling... It's like I got hit by a dump truck, and now
a dump truck
literally, and now I'm feeling the effects of it. So just trying to get back into reality and figure out that, hey, you feel exhausted right now, like you feel sick, you feel heavy, be lighter, be refreshed, is a challenge that I've been going through this past week and specifically today. So it was nice that after work, I actually got to go talk to my mentor through the leadership course that Stephen mentioned earlier. And it was a good opportunity for just me to receive some refreshment into my life, some refreshment into my mind, some refreshment into my heart and soul, solely based on the source that my mentor gave me through the Word of God, through the truth that he was feeding me and stuff, and the encouragements that he was giving me. And also, got a shout out to my wife as well. Like, she is that individual that continuously leads me back to the source each and every single day when I'm feeling like, somebody that I'm not. And so that being said, I wanted to, I know I'm going on a tangent, but I want to go back to what is source, how do we define it? How do we look at it? And many people can define it a lot of different ways, but it's the thing or the person that you go to gain knowledge or research or comfort or whatever you want, to gain whatever out of it. So very, like, basically a source could be, social media, or it could be the news for the older generation. And even within social media, the younger generation could find themselves getting a lot of their information from places like TikTok or Instagram, whereas the older generation, we call themselves the Facebook generation. Anything they know, they heard it from the grapevine of Facebook.
I heard from the Facebook,
or if
young people be doing these things,
or if it's
wild. I heard my Facebook group. Where was the sitting dog moms?
Like what? Like our neighborhood group chat or something like that. I'm like, come on, seriously? And if it's not Facebook, it's either Fox Network for the Republicans or CNN for the Democrats. You know what I mean? Or if it's not news, it could be just simply the internet or somebody else, other people, usually a close family member or close friends. It could even be your job, or it can even be money. Money could be a source in which you find yourself motivated to do certain things or to think certain ways. Or even just commentaries, whether it's biblical commentaries or commentaries about wealth, commentaries about health, commentaries about whatever. So I guess the biggest thing that I'm trying to say when it comes to source, there's so many different definitions for it, and so many different examples of what that could be. So kind of sticking away from that and coming into the perspective of what type of sources are there. And I brought this up to Stephen a while ago, and this takes me back to my primary and secondary school days where we talked about
elementary school, high school for those.
Yeah, I
don't understand. Grew up in America.
Whatever.
Y'all don't get it.
But I mentioned primary and secondary school because that's actually the type of sources.
Yeah.
It's a primary source and a secondary source and a tertiary source.
Educate them all. Tell these young ones what's up.
And a lot of you guys already know all this is, but if you want to be refreshed, a primary source is a source where it's the first-hand documents or the first-hand evidence that provide direct evidence on that topic that you're trying to find out about. So it's the primary source. It's the person themselves that told you that thing, or the book itself that opened this up to you, or the money. It's what I mean. Like it's a primary source. And then secondary source. So these are things or accounts written after the fact in which something happened, and then you're looking at it in hindsight. So this is somebody basically recording something that happened or picking up artifacts about something, or basically a secondary source. They're not usually the evidence, but they're usually a commentary about the evidence. Something about that thing or somebody's perspective about that thing. And then last but not least, a tertiary source. So this presents or summarizes a version of material usually which references back to the secondary source. So this could be an abstract or even the dictionary or a handbook, or you mentioned a textbook earlier. It's something that references something else. So just going through that line. But all that being said, whoever this source is or whatever this source is, it has a huge stronghold in how we view this world, the lens in which we live our lives, or we navigate through a struggle, or we navigate through a relationship. So having said all that, Stephen, pick up here and just let me know, how do we navigate through a world where we're filled with sources everywhere we go, everywhere we look, from the moment we wake up in the morning to the moment we close our eyes to go to bed.
I think, man, gosh, you said so much.
I know.
Man, you gave me so much material to work with, so much primary source to work with. I'll touch on that. I'll come back to what you just asked, the question of, how do we navigate that? Because I think, like you said, there are different sources, and kind of the example you gave with primary, secondary, and tertiary, it does, oftentimes that's used for like historical, like news, or where you gain your information. And I love how you said, like, there's a lot of definitions for source, because when we came together and talked about this, I was thinking of source like, where do you get your joy and comfort from? Where do you find when you're like having a bad day? Where do you run to first? Do you go and listen to music? Do you go play video games? Do you go paint? Do you go talk to your girlfriend? Like, when I say girlfriends, like, not your guy and your girlfriend. It's like your girl and like your girlfriend, like your group of friends, or do you call your dad or your mom? And do you scroll through like social media, like TikTok, scroll for hours and stuff like that? And so both of those are like, I think both of those are key components to asking like this question of who or what is your source, because it all ties in together so perfectly, because it's a part of who we are. Like it's not one is better than the other. It's like those are integrated in all of us, whether we like to believe that or not. Just to different degrees. And so when we do that, when we're navigating through or just wading through the different things that are coming at us and where we want to draw some sort of comfort, I think asking yourself the question, maybe like, if I continue this, where is this leading me and where I want to go? Because, for example, like if I wanted to find out, like, if I wanted, like, this is a funny example, I'm sure this is like a school example, like, if I wanted...
Primary school, secondary school?
Primary school. And if I was a little wee second grader, maybe like 6 centimeters shorter than what I am now. I wanted to learn...
I think you gotta tell the audience how tall you are.
I'm actually 5'5", which is like pretty tall for Asians.
That's not too bad.
But it's better than like 4'3" like Aaron.
You can hear her laugh in the background.
But like, let's say the example is like, I want to go learn more about Africa.
Yeah.
I want to learn more about Africa and the culture that's there, like the history of like the rituals, like the dances, the food, the lifestyle, kind of how they traveled around, like, you know, with the environment. And I said, I want to learn more about Africa and like the different facets and the different tribes and all of these. And I end up going and I travel over to Great Britain or Russia and ask them, what's Africa? It's not really like a great spot to go because that's not the closest source. Like, that's not a source that is focused on the benefit of you learning more about Africa. Or if I am wanting to, and this is another crude example, but like if I was wanting to relax or something like that and just like calm my mind down, the goal would not to be start like an organization and try to run it. Like that's not really the way to go. Like it'd be silly. Right? And I think like in our heads we know that. We know that, but there is a certain work that you have to be like, you have to search for the source. Like, you know, when you look for a source, it's not always easy to find it.
No, I like that.
Like for those who are in school or who have been through school or have jobs with writing, like a news reporter, you don't just write stuff out of your butt. Like you should be going and talking to people and hearing the stories and hearing what the truth is about whatever you're about to write about or whatever you're about to feel about a certain topic. And so that's, I think, a good question to ask yourself is, what am I desiring? What am I wanting? And so I can pull things that I can find that will help support me in that. Right? And so that's very generalized. I think for the Christian, or for those who are professing like the faith of believing in Jesus Christ, it's what are the things that are going to bring me closer to God?
It's funny that that's the point where you ended up, because like hearing your perspective of source, it almost became like more personal. You know, instead of looking at it from a research point of view, from a general overview, let's bring it home and let's talk about ourselves, and let's talk about how we are reacting and how we are living in our lives. So for example, I can bring another example in. I feel tired right now. I feel lonely right now. What am I going to rationalize in my mind to do because of what I'm feeling? Am I going to, lay on the couch and watch stuff that I don't want to watch or that I shouldn't be watching because that's the source that's feeding into my emotion right now? Or am I going to go into the Bible and find and search for the true source? Or am I going to go outside and find community and accountability that can also pour back into me and then lead me back to that Bible that is the true source? So that's a heavy simple example, but it starts there and then it expounds itself even larger as you start thinking about bigger things and even bigger things. And so it's crazy. I love that. That's where you rationalize your thought process too. So
I think man, you basically sped run through literally all the points you want with that example. But let's walk through that. We've defined the source as like things that we draw knowledge on or even comfort or purpose on. And so let's talk about what we think are like worldly sources and like the dangers of that. And we can go into a couple examples that we have seen like that are most like personal. So or just most pertinent like in at least American culture in the United States. When I say American, I mean United States. And so I think we can go back and forth, but I think one of them, like a worldly source that's super easy, is social media.
TikTok.
Video games.
Yes, a big one.
what else? I mean,
you mentioned music as well.
Yeah, music is huge.
Music is huge.
Drugs, alcohol, which is, I mean, still a drug, but
the news.
Yeah, the news. Going out and partying, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's not to say like all of these examples are just bad.
Mm-hmm.
These are also just things of the world that I've seen people just draw upon to sustain themselves.
And here's another one, which is kind of funny and ironic. Commentaries, specifically podcasts. We're living as you guys are listening to a podcast right now. We live in a world of podcasts. There's so many podcasts about so many different things. You know, from how do I get rich in a month to how do I get through my struggle with porn and addiction, or how do I learn how to be whatever. Like you want to learn about it. There's a podcast about it, so that's definitely a huge source about it.
I agree. And even, kind of like what you said, even like we live in a world of podcasts, like, I've wondered this to myself before we even started this, is like, am I the cure, or am I becoming part of the problem?
Yes. Yeah, imagine this. Imagine a random person listening to a podcast right now. The only source of edification as far as their spiritual life is our podcast. Imagine us being the source of this person.
I'm going to get into that, but I will tell whoever's listening, if you're that person, I am a ghost of what you're wishing for.
There's a reason why this is called the Imperfect Podcast. We are not perfect beyond all means. Please do not trust us and just us when it comes to things that you're dealing with, or things that you're struggling with. Yes, do listen to us. Do take our points and challenge yourself based on what we're telling you. But yet go and back our points with the true Bible. And I know we're going to get into that. So I just want to put that in there. So.
Gotta take a leaf out of Aaron's book and just be like, precaution. From last episode, like, we're not endorsing the list. Like,
But hey, still listen to us though. Please, we need the views.
We need the feedback.
Yeah.
But I think when we talk about these worldly sources, I think the thread is either, it doesn't matter what it is. Like you can insert, this is what I do throughout my week to feel like I'm not being bothered by work, or I'm not drowned in work. And oftentimes this is something that it feels like it gives me purpose. It satisfies my loneliness or my need for feeling like I'm not just alone or just adrift in this world, or satisfies my my competitive nature or my pride, or I don't know, whatever it may be. And there's multiple ways this can come about. And I think what the dangers, at least for me, the way I've kind of seen it played out, like things that we listed may be good or bad. It's really, what role does it play in your life? So I'll give another crude example. So I think for people who like stream on Twitch, which Twitch is a streaming platform for video games, and I think there are people who are great at it, like they love it, and they can bring a lot of joy to other people, and they just do it because they want to do it. And then there are moments where people are on social media or those platforms where they're in the limelight because they want to be seen. They want to matter to people. They want to not be adrift in the world and be forgotten and passed by. And so the danger of that is anything of that nature that comes in at like popularity or things that are brief, is that you fade in and out very fast. So like any social media, like you can have your moment of like, this was my moment.
And it only be 2 seconds.
2 seconds. And then the world is looking at another person. And so at least for the way I was thinking about it, it's like to rely on such an unstable foundation to draw your joy and comfort from. I'm not saying that's dumb. I'm saying that's scary. Like that's scary for me to think about people being in positions where they can be at the height of their emotions, and the next day just come crashing down. to
just
me,
like that too.
Like that's a very scary place to be, because I don't believe like we were meant to swing back and forth in our emotions. Our bodies really cannot handle that very well.
Yeah.
And that goes in like many different ways. I think like not just emotions, but like a physical example is like sleep.
Yeah. Trust me and my wife know all about that right now. We need our sleep. Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah.
Because if you think about like I'm a guy who's like a biochemistry major, and I don't know everything, but I've learned a lot just listening, and it's like, you weren't meant to just run off of 3 hours of sleep and then crash for 16, 18 hours. Like you were meant to be in some sort of rhythm. Yep. And humans are creatures of habit. Yeah.
Find your routine, you stick to it.
What's a circadian rhythm? Yeah. Like it's parts of it are innate in us.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, no, I think you hit every single point head on, and it's crazy. And one thing I'm thinking is so many things that we've mentioned, so many sources. The biggest thing that I'm hearing is, in and of itself, those sources can be scary, and they can be a danger if that's where we go to, and that's the only thing that we're relying on. If social media or that Twitch account or that song or that podcast, that's the only source that we're going to as a worldly source, quote unquote, and we're not relying on anything else. Man, the content in which we're listening to, that can come back and really, really hurt us after the fact, that whatever you're going through, you're not going to be going through it forever. You're not going to be lonely forever. You're not going to be tired forever. So like, what's next? So I think that's a good narrative in which I want to open up to the third question. Like, what are some dangers that we can find in church sources, or what are church sources, for example, and like how can we find dangers within those things that, from a completely outside point of view, be like, well, that's a churchly thing, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. But yet, why is it a danger? So yeah. Right at the top of my head, I was thinking just the people, the preachers and teachers and commentaries that we're listening to. I personally, I love like preachers who really know the word, who really stick to the word, but also are really great at storytelling, or who are really good at bringing truth and life out of the text that they're reading. So I'll shout it off my back, and this is a shout out. So if these guys are listen to this podcast, that's a great honor. But for me, one of my favorite preachers and teachers are John MacArthur is up there, and I'll explain why in a second. But he's a person that I really look up to, and I really love a lot of his stuff. Another guy is Louis Giglio. I love Louis Giglio and his philosophy and his theology and the way he just teaches on the Bible. Another guy is Robert Madu. I love Robert Madu. He has an African background with his family, and he's down in Dallas. I got to meet him a couple of times in the college that I went to, and I love just the way he narrates the theology, the way he storytells. Yeah. And then I'm trying to think of a couple others. I mean, Craig Rochelle, he's a powerful leader in the church, so he's great in himself. So what about you? Like, who are some people that you listen to, and like, how can we find danger in a lot of those things in itself?
So I would say for me, like, for a period of time in my life, it was Michael Todd down in Oklahoma, which I think he's actually a great dude. Like, I do. I think he, I haven't gotten to listen to a lot of his recent stuff, but at the time of when I was listening to him, I thought his heart was in the right place. And I can't speak on it too much right now just because I haven't been listening to him, so I don't know. And I don't know him personally, but his vision in the time when I was listening to him is great. I think Francis Chan is really, really, his heart is there for people. His heart is there for people, even when people around are like, I don't know if you should actually be doing like these events with these people. And I also just like his attitude towards, and his humility in his life. And if you guys have a chance to like look at his hear out his testimony and like the things that he's had to deal with at a young age, but then also give up after building his own life around him, what he gave up for the Lord is awesome. I think I'll go a little different. And so one is KB, like the rapper, which I still think like the dude is great, like beyond his rap music, which I enjoy a ton. He has a podcast, and for a while I was listening to his podcast, and I still do. And I would draw upon that and hear wisdom, and it was really awesome. And then I don't know if you've ever done this, Akoo, but this is really, so I mean, both of us have like a worship playlist that we have, or music that we listen to, but there's times where I'd feel like a certain emotion where I'd feel upset, and I would cue a certain selection of songs that I would want to hear that would help me feel better. Where I'd be like, I enjoy these songs the most, and it'll put me through like a flow state of like, this is what I need to hear. I need to hear King of Kings. I need to hear Promises. Actually, thank God. Like,
so for me, it's not actually a queue of songs. For me, it's actually one song.
Okay.
So Hillsong has an album that, you know, the album I'm talking about, of Dirt and Grace, that they recorded live in Jerusalem. So there's a song in there. I think it's called Heart Like Heaven Falling. So whatever I was going through, it could be sadness, anger, like envy, whatever. Like, I just play that song and I would cue it like 5 times. I would start out pissed off, but by that 5th time that song is playing, man. Like, so I do.
I think like those things, like they're church verses, and there are other ones that we could speak on, like, going to church every Sunday. I just love it. Or I love this certain type of worship that this church
or hanging
does.
out with church friends, going to the accountability group, or like the community group, like
And I think like, again, like we're not saying like all those things are bad things, or that they're all good. There's some dangers to each and every one, but again, they involve people. And I think like that was, I loved that point that you brought up, because we put our faith in people very easily, even though like we do want to trust, like we do want to trust other people, but going back to Romans, Romans 3:23 is, for all have fallen short of the glory of God,
and sinned and fall short.
For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And so when we say that, we're like, oh yeah, for me it just means like I've fallen short, but this is applying to all people. And even if you're like saved and like you say like I do believe in, there are other people who say I do believe in God, and I'm just trying my best to follow after God. The key word there is I'm trying my best, and that's the best they can do. And so people and have moments of weakness. So oftentimes when we build our faith or our trust or our sustain, or I guess sustenance. Sustenance.
That's a great word.
Our sustenance upon someone else, and they fail us. It's devastating, and I think
it is
probably the example that Akoo and I probably know of that we've actually never talked about, but I'm sure we both know, is during COVID, it was Ravi Zacharias. Who,
that's one of them.
Is like, and those for you who like. Who are non-believers, you're like, I don't know who this Ravi Zacharias is, a weird name. Like, he's not white. He's not, you know, and he has had his history a little bit, is he's had a really strong ministry for years that spans decades in apologetics and defending the word, and then over COVID he had passed away, and then some sexual sins had come to light about what he was doing, and it wasn't things that were just tertiary sources. They were primary sources, which is like is you cannot dispute primary sources.
Like how many times in the church world have we heard of that one pastor that we really look up to, or that really good mega pastor that is really strong with a lot of, you know, look at Hillsong and what happened in New York City. You know, like it's people. It's putting trust in people, and people are not perfect. No matter how high up they might be, however many like zeros they might be pocketing in their budget, like people are not perfect, and that's where the danger comes in, even in church sources. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's something that's the one thing that I had on that point. The danger of church sources is the fact that it's people. So I love that you mentioned that. Keep going, man. Keep going.
For sure. And I think I'm going to tie these things together, because I know earlier when we had talked about this before, we had separated worldly source and church sources, and we did separate it out. But as I'm talking, like, they really aren't so different.
No, they're
like
not.
They really aren't so different, because those of you who are Christian, and those of you even know are not Christian, understand we live in a broken world. Like, it's clearly broken. Like, things that are happening in, like, Ukraine right now, and just even within, like, the porn industry and what's happening with human trafficking. We see that a lot, and it's no surprise that things are failing around us. And not to say that, again, like, that everything is terrible. I think people and things, like, even the things of, like, going out and doing stuff, like, in nature, like, yes, like, that's great. Going and playing sports, that's great.
That's great.
Hanging out with people, that's great. But I think a good way to summarize what we're trying to say here is they are all types and shadows of the glory of God. Like, they're only, like, in the best way I can put it, and that's why I said, like, if you're listening to us and think, like, and not thinking, like, this is, you're getting your edification from us, I can assure you right now, this is, like, I am not even close to even being called, like, a fraction of God's glory.
No, we're not.
And so, just thinking about that, it's like, okay, yes, like, I can draw my joy from playing a sport, but what happens when an injury happens and you no longer have that?
You're speaking my testimony.
Sorry. I was actually thinking of my friend from college, because there was a time...
Am I your friend from college?
I'm going to go on a quick tangent, and if my boy Sam is listening to this, like, I love you, dude. And we were freshmen in college, and we both were on the tennis team together, and a week before the fall semester started, we were practicing. It was like one of those mandatory, not mandatory practices, coaches put on. And we were out there and we're hitting, and it's near the end of, like, literally the second, like, session or whatever, like, the day 2, and his right shoulder drops.
Oh no.
And we're like, dude, what's wrong with your shoulder? He's like, nothing's wrong with my shoulder. He's like, dude, you're, like, crooked. And he's like, I don't know, I actually can't raise it. And we found out, like, we didn't know for the longest time what was wrong with him, but we did find out it was, like, a nerve issue where it happened within his nerve connecting his arm and his brain. And he went through so much my freshman year, where doctors didn't communicate, and he was on putting, like, a bunch of drugs that should not have been mixed. So he had multiple seizures, and we had to take him to the hospital. He couldn't go to class. He could hardly hold a pencil. All of these things. And he had told me later, after, like, a while after, he's like, the thing that I prided myself in and knew that I found value in was my drumming skills and tennis.
Two things that
required fine motor, and he lost it, and he was like, I need to find something that sustains me when I don't have my hands.
Well, what happens when it all comes crashing down? When your source breaks down right in front of you.
And so I think a lot of what I want to impress is ask, like, ourselves and other people, like, you who are listening, is like, okay, is my source of joy in the things I do for people? If I lost the ability to speak, would I be able to still find purpose in my life? If I lost my hands or my athletic ability or the way I look, would I lose my value? If this person, like, does this thing and takes this away, would I lose my value? And, like, you can play these what ifs on your own. And it's not like I'm saying that these things will happen. I'm just saying, think about how unsteady your sources and what you draw near to.
Yeah. How unreliable they can be by themselves.
Yes.
On their own.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of it could be coming from we're the fueler towards those sources. Like, we're the ones that are keeping those sources alive.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about your friend, and I'm putting myself in your friend's situation because it happened to me too. I went through a really, really bad injury, and then a couple of years later I went through a car accident, and a lot of my talent and a lot of my passion to continue playing soccer really hindered me. And a lot of times the source in and of itself, like, it can't do anything to control you. We're the ones that are actually fueling those sources to to control us. So for me, it was constantly thinking about, okay, what can I do to get better? You know, how can I get into this college so they can see how I play? How can I, do all these things so that my source can be magnified? But yet I was realizing that, man, I'm chasing the wrong thing here.
Yeah.
And I'm chasing the wrong thing.
You're trying to prove yourself
exactly.
to something.
I'm trying to prove myself to something that doesn't even have a voice.
Oh,
I'm trying to prove myself to something that doesn't even have a soul.
Yeah.
A lot of times our sources are things that are not even tangible,
Right.
And even if it's people, those people are not reliable.
Oh, yeah.
So we got to ask ourselves, okay, what's next? And I think that's an amazing trajectory point to come to our fourth and final point. And all right, if everything that we've just said in the last 40 minutes is not or should not be our true source, what then should be? Mm-hmm. And for our Christian viewers, you guys know very well where we're about to go.
Yes.
But for those who are not necessarily Christian in this moment, I would urge you guys to navigate and have a conversation with a friend who calls themselves a Christian and ask them, hey, explain to me what the gospel is. Like this word gospel, I'm hearing a lot. I heard it in this podcast called the Imperfect Podcast.
Yes.
Talk to me about it. What is the gospel? And hopefully they'll guide you towards the one pure, true source that we believers call the Bible. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I'm going to kind of enter this point with something that I mentioned earlier in this podcast about how I've been feeling, not just today, but the past week or so, how I've just been feeling tired and weak and weary. And if I wasn't a believer, Stephen, I'll tell you straight up, like, and you know my tendencies, you know my characters.
Yeah, I do.
Stephen is one of the few people that knows me very well. Like, I have this inkling where if I'm struggling through something, I go in my head a lot and I just shut down. I shut down and my source becomes my mind, my brain, and things that I'm going through, my experiences that I've...
Your mind palace.
And that's where I live. And in turn, it hinders and it hurts not just myself, but everybody that's around me. From my friends to now my wife to even my dog. But because I'm a Christian and because I get to have a relationship with Christ, I get to realize that, hey, when I'm feeling lost, when I'm feeling dispassion, when I'm feeling, like in need of something, I know exactly where to go, where I can find fulfillment. I can find fuel. And it's really funny because 2 days ago, I was me and Stephen and a couple other guys, we have this accountability group where we go through our Bible reading every day, and we try to do it every day, and we hold each other accountable on days that we can't. So I think this was on Monday. I finished the book of 2 Thessalonians, and verse 3, literally the verse starts with saying, do not grow weary in the good things that you do. Yeah. That's all I'm going to read. Like, there's no need to go further. And I'm just like, okay. I mean, for me, that's all I needed because it was just a refreshment. And this whole week has been a testimony of how God is refreshing me through His Word and through the things that He's telling me. And for me, just seeing that, I was going through like what Bible verses I should bring forward to this conversation, and that's one of the first ones that stuck to me because that's exactly what I'm feeling right now. I'm in a process or a mini season where I'm just tired and I'm weary. And Jesus says, do not grow weary of the good things that you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I am in control. I am your source of life. Don't grow weary. And man, it's so encouraging, and for me, knowing that I can go back into the one true source, which is the Bible, and I can find a lot of the answers of what I'm struggling through. And if it's not an answer, it's abiding in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
It's asking God to reveal what he wants to reveal to me in the process, to teach me what he's trying to teach me through the journey that I'm going through, even though I might not know what it is. Mm-hmm. So as I find my other verses, I want you to speak a little bit on what you think the true source is, as we kind of wrap up for today's podcast.
Yes. What I think the true source is. Yeah, I think... before I answer, I just love that you brought in like the reading that you had just from a couple of days ago into it, because I think what we're so often quick to do is be like, my source is something like that's been long standing or like is established, or I don't even know how to describe it, but something that has been like recorded, but for some reason a lot of people write off the Bible.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tie in your primary, secondary, tertiary thing is, oftentimes when we view history, it feels very far from us, like it doesn't relate to us. In 2 Timothy, in history, it's very far from us right now, like thousands of years. Yeah. But it was so relevant for you in this moment, and I think that's the beautiful thing about the Bible. Yeah. And tying into the idea of what is our true source is a lot of our other sources, they're just things that have been established in this world, and we as Christians believe that God is living and is a living God, and he is interceding and he's working, actively working through the things he has already provided and the people he's providing around you. And oftentimes we focus on the people like around us, like, oh, this is the community that I'm part of, like, oh, here, this is like my church or my people, but oftentimes we skip over the value of the words that he spoke directly, the primary source that he says. That he says, this is my word breathed. Like, this is the things that I find pertinent that I'm giving to you on this earth. I'm recording it.
This is what it is.
I'm recording this for you. And so sometimes it's hard to believe that, because you're like, wasn't this written by some other...
Yeah, like, how does this relate to me in 2020 post-pandemic world? You know? And I get it, like, that's very difficult to, wrap, and I want to go super deep into this, but I can't really, it's kind of hard as you wrap up, but I think the true source is going to the one who is in control of all things. And I think right now, like, I'm going through 1 Samuel, and I'll just give a background. 1 Samuel is about the Israelites, and they've had a series of where God is the one residing over them through priests, and then the people ask for a king, and so he gives them this guy named Saul, and he's like really good looking, ends up failing them as a leader in various ways, and the people can't really do anything about it. And it says that Saul falls out of favor with God, but he still stays as a leader. It's like, okay, that's weird. He still stays as a leader, but things get way harder for him. It says this is a wartime, so he was fighting against other countries, and he's like, his battles got harder. It's not that they didn't exist, but his battles got harder without the presence of the Lord. And so when we talk about true source, it's what are the things that can bind me closer to God's presence? And oftentimes we're like, oh man, this worship, gosh, this is amazing. This is like the closest I've ever felt with God. It's like, in that moment, but that's just a fraction of God living through these people, and you're missing out the contentment and joy that you can get by communing with him in prayer and in reading his word. Or even just listening if you're not a good reader. Just listening. Just listening.
So true source. I believe the true source is the Bible. It's like a divine like book or story, and it's God's story that tells us stories like about people, about humans, which humans have not really changed all that much. Like they're the same problems, and it tells us stories about patterns and people and gives us comfort about a God who sees all of us in our distress, our discomfort, our frustrations, our anxiety, and he's telling us, before I even sent my son, I still walked with people.
Exactly. And to that point, really quickly, I wanted to mention this to people who look at the Bible and they're like, man, I don't trust the whole Bible. And I think a lot of this, we touched on it on our first episode. But like some people are like, I'll read the New Testament, but when it comes to the First Samuels or the Deuteronomy, it's like, I don't really want to camp over there.
Wasn't for me.
And to that I'll say, look at First John, which is in the New Testament. I mean, not First John. In John chapter 1, verse 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And what John is specifically talking towards in reference to is Jesus. Yeah. Jesus was in the beginning with God. So when we look at the Bible from the beginning all the way through the New Testament, we realize that the whole Bible has one story and one theme. And if you're wondering what that theme is, go back to our first episode, but really quickly, it's the gospel. Yeah. It's the gospel. It's the story of Jesus Christ. So you have to come to the conclusion that, man, the whole Bible is my one true source. Yeah. Because it tells us the life, the story, the death, the resurrection, and now the redemption that we get to have because of Jesus. Yeah. So
let's round off this. That's, a fantastic point, but I want to round this off with a question to you, Akoo.
Definitely.
Which we've talked about the futility of sources that are not God, and then we've talked about the greatness of it, and we can expound, just like try to describe it, but just of what it is and like a definition of like what we believe the true source is. But I want you to touch on a little bit for those listening. For you personally, how has communing with God as we believe is the true source, how has that transformed like your days? What does that look like? What are you getting from that makes it different from those other ones where even though Akoo before in his life was very much into soccer and is very intellectual, where those things did not sustain him, how is this sustaining you?
Man, I'm just going to start off by reading straight from the source itself. I'm going to read from 1 Corinthians chapter 8, and I'm going to pick it up in verse 6. And this is kind of weird because I don't really read out of this version, but this is the amplified version. So picking up in verse 6, it said, "Yet for us as believers, there is but one God, the Father, who is the source of all things, and we exist for him, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, by whom are all things that have been created. And we as Christians, we as believers, exist and have life and have been redeemed through Christ." And oh my gosh, there's so much nuggets there and so much good truth there. But from that reading that I just said, for me, how it's changed in recognizing that Jesus, that the Bible is my one true source, is because this is eternal. A lot of the things that I had been running through were just temporarily. Yeah, they might seem like they're good or they are giving me fulfillment in the moment, but kind of like your friend, what happens once that injury comes? What happens once that money goes away? What happens once that friend dies?
That pandemic
What happens once that pandemic hits? What happens once that pastor or that preacher or that teacher ends up cheating on his wife for the past 40 years? What happens when your country that you love so much ends up going to war? What happens when your brothers and sisters, end up like leaving the family because they want to pursue other things? It goes back to what you said earlier, is a lot of these things, it comes from people. And people are not reliable. You said the wages of sin, or we all have sinned and we fall short to glory of God, Romans 3:23. So for me personally, it's coming to the realization that a lot of the things outside of God that I had been putting my faith and I had been kind of searching for fulfillment or for nourishment or for whatever, it only was edifying for that moment. It was only temporary for a specific season or even a specific day, or even at times like when I was really into a lot of lust and a lot of pornography. It was only fulfilling for 2 seconds. 4 seconds max.
Yeah.
So it's recognizing that, man, when I'm going through something, when I'm navigating through a season that's really harsh, or a season even of triumph, knowing that my source in which I'm getting a lot of energy from is an eternal source, a source that has promised me life that is everlasting, truth that is all-knowing, and an opportunity to abide and to live in Him in the next life in heaven. Man, that's where I'm gonna camp out all day.
Yeah.
Even in the moments where I feel like, God, I don't really understand what's going on right now. I don't really understand the reason why I'm going through this pain right now. But God, I know in the long run, You're already ahead. He's both omnipotent and omniscient.
Yeah.
So He's in that season of triumph when I'm still in the season of struggle.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's trusting and knowing that God is in control. And once you've walked until you can't walk anymore, God is going to pick you up.
Yeah.
And He's gonna take you through whatever you're taking through, or He's taking me through whatever I'm going through. In the process of these episodes, you're gonna get to know more and more about who I am, about my family, about my relationship with my wife, and you're gonna recognize that without God, man, it could all be in shambles right now. Because me by myself, I'm not perfect. Yeah. I'm a sinner, and I have so many struggles, and I have so much trauma. And the only way that I see myself being fulfilled and being encouraged and growing each and every single day is because I strive myself to abide in the Word of God, in the source that is the blood of the Lamb, written 2,000+ years ago.
Yeah.
That is still true in my life today. So that's all I gotta say to that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And gosh, there's so much I could say about that, and I would love to just dive in more. I think the thing that stuck out to me the most that this is how we'll end is I think what was incredible about how you spoke about it, of what the Bible is for you, it was very consistent no matter what you were going through. And I think oftentimes our sources ebb and flow with the times, where it works in seasons of happiness, and then doesn't work in seasons of doubt. Yeah. And so you run to something else. Yeah. And so a good example of that is like, I like to go play sports, and that's what makes me happy. If I get lonely, I'll run to pornography to make me comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, you find yourself with a lot of different sources for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah. But for what is incredible, and just what is just the depth of God and being at your source, or Jesus being your source, it's so consistent that it pulls you through every day, no matter what the world is bringing you, whether it's good or bad. And I think that's one of the most reliable things. It stands the wind and the storms, and shines brightly on sunny days.
Yep. Yes, it does.
Right? It's not hindered by the things around it. Yeah. And I think that's the difference of, like, if you're tired of, like, the back and forth life of the extremes, it can be draining. You don't really know what's next. Yeah. It's hard. Yeah. It's really hard. It's an anxiety driven lifestyle in many ways, unless you choose to ignore that. Yeah. But with this, there is a consistent joy that you get even when you don't know the future. And so that's what we cling on to and try to race towards. Exactly. And I believe that's like what the source is, and what it is for us, and why it's so necessary. Yeah. Because we can't control the world around us, but there's one thing that allows us to keep on moving in a way that is gratifying and beneficial to those around us.
Yes. Man. Wow, I didn't think it was going to be that long, but I love that. I love that, man. So yeah. What's next?
What's next? We'll figure it out. But in any case, thank you for staying till the end. Yeah. Give us feedback. Yeah. We want to hear what you guys are thinking and what topics. Yeah. But
and also, like, talk to your friends, your families. Yeah. Talk to people who you're close to about what you're hearing. If you are listening to this, like, man, don't just hear it and then keep it to yourself. Challenge yourself, and even challenge us by talking to other people, going into the Bible and saying, is what Stephen and Akoo saying really true?
Yeah.
And if it is, how can that impact my life in the moment?
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah,
definitely do
good
that.
question.
And other than that,
catch you
else?
on the next episode.
Catch you on the flip side.
That's right.
All right, see you guys.
Peace.
Peace.